Hi everybody. Hi Dr. Nick. Ha, only kidding. Pipes here. Just thought I'd start off with something humorous. I'm in a kind of a humorous mood today, and I thought I'd also look at doing a tutorial regarding creating a simple tiling texture in Substance Designer. I've had quite a few questions saying I'd like to learn more about Substance Designer. Is it possible you could do a tutorial just showing me your workflow procedure for making a tiling texture using Substance Designer? And I'm also going to use ZBrush in this tutorial. So let's get cracking, let's start straight away. So here we are in Photoshop, and what I've got here is a tiling height map texture which is 2048 by 2048, and what we're going to create is floor tiles, so some dirty floor tiles that you might find in a station or something like that. So this was generated in ZBrush a while ago. It's just a lot of separate tiles that I created, put them all together, chipped off some of the edges, and just made sure it was quite generic. So I just wanted just the edge chippings there and making sure it tiled. So I then did a grab doc for the alpha, and this is what I got from that original tiling sculpt. So I've already got a basis to start making my tiling texture. Now I've got a few options. I can either use a photograph to create a normal map, because what I want to do is create a normal map out of this, so that in the end it makes it easier to start doing the tiling texture within Substance Designer if you've actually got some sort of normal map there. So we can either use change this directly in Substance Designer, this height map, and change it to a normal map. So then straight away we've already got a normal map straight from this height map. You could use an image and try to create some sort of normal map out of an image, which is just don't even bother. It's just not worth doing it. Too much noise will probably be in the image. It'll come out all lumpy, and I'm not a great fan, and you've got absolutely no control. Another way is that we could re-import this back into ZBrush, so then we can add some surface noise and also create some of the grouting as well, and also any small cracks or anything in ZBrush, and then create a normal map from there, which is what I'll be doing today. But you could also do that in Substance Designer using this, but I just wanted to actually do it in ZBrush to have more control. Another way in ZBrush is we could start completely from scratch, make each separate tile, and then place them onto the 2.5D canvas and make a normal map from there, or use them as an insert multi-mesh brush and create a normal map that way as well. But I'm not going to do it from that point. I'm going to do it from this point, but still go into ZBrush. So let's have a look at creating that normal map that we can use in Substance Designer. So here we are in ZBrush. Here's one I did earlier. Let's have a look. So this is one I've done earlier from this. As you can see, it's got some slight noise variation. It's got some of the groutings actually there, and it's not all over. All the surface noise is not all over. There's just small dimples where it's been damaged or scratched, and these need to be very subtle, because obviously it's floor tile, so it's going to be quite shiny, even though there'll be dirt on top and everything. But you are going to get these very slight indentations and dimples and things that have just through wear and tear, really. So all that I've done is I've gone in and I've created a plane 3D. Just go in here, create plane 3D. So I've created that. I've zoomed out, pressed F on the keyboard to make sure it's framed, so I know that then it will tile. And then I've gone back to anti-alias in half, so you get some nice quality there. I've gone into geometry, and as you can see at the moment we're sitting at 1.5 million total points at the minute. That's because I subdivided it up to level 6 and then I deleted lower on there. So now we've got this base tiling square already. So what I've also done is I've gone into the alpha palette and I've imported that alpha from Photoshop, that height map, as you can see there, and I've imported that into ZBrush. Now the document is at 2048 by 2048. I have that as a starting document, so that because really all I do at the moment is a lot of tiling textures. That's what I'm really enjoying. So I always make sure my document's set up at 2048 by 2048. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to apply this alpha to this plane. So this is really simple. Just going to go down to masking, mask by alpha. It might be closed like that. Just click on there and then mask by alpha. So now this alpha there this alpha map there is now translated onto the actual canvas itself. And then what we can do from there is a little trick that I picked up from badking.au, or the ZBrush guys. If you go into edge loop, there's an edge loop masked border. Now what this is going to do is, when I click this button, it's going to create 3 poly groups. It's going to create the ones where it's white there. There's going to be then another poly group which is going to be so thin just around each of these white squares, and then you're going to have one for the grout, another poly group there. What it's doing in effect is just giving it an edge loop around each of the poly groups. So there's going to be 2 poly groups but 1 edge loop. So if I click this, there you go, it'll do its magic. So I'm going to go down and clear the mask. You can either swipe using the canvas or just click clear here, and it looks like nothing's happened at all. But if I go into polyframe mode, now we can see we've got these separate, let me zoom in, we've got these separate poly groups. So we've got, as I mentioned, it's really small, I don't know if you can quite see it, but there's actually an edge loop around that. So we've got a poly group for the main white tiles. So if I just press F just to zoom it back, and F, frame it again into that. So what we've got a poly group for the actual main part of the tile, and then we've got the poly group for the grout. Now because I've got that edge around it, this is extremely useful if you're going to do some, for example in deformation, any polish by groups, because if I pull the slider for polish by groups, sometimes it gets really doughy, but because we've got those edge loops there, if I pull that polish by groups up, it'll keep the consistency of the edges, but it'll make sure that all the polygons are smooth. I don't need to do that on this occasion for this, but it's just an example of why it's good to use the edge loop masked border. Okay, so we've got no masking on there now at all, and we've got our poly groups. So now the next thing what I want to do is I want to pull out these purple poly groups to make it look like the tiles are actually sticking outwards. But we need to just make sure that when we select this, we're only selecting the actual poly group, just one of the poly groups. We don't want to pull everything out because we want to leave the grout and the edge loop behind. So best way to do this is go into brush and make sure under auto masking that mask by poly groups is at 100%. So wherever I start to click, it's only going to utilize that poly group. It's only going to affect that poly group. So if I click on move, because I want to move these outwards, I'm just going to tilt this to the side. Okay, let me just turn polyframes off. Well, actually no, I'll keep them on so I can see what's going on. I'm going to click here and I'm just going to drag this outwards like that. So I've clicked on the purple, and then I'm just going to click on this blue circle there to constrain it, and now I'm going to pull it outwards holding shift, and you can see I'm just pulling this outwards slightly, and that to me looks a little off. Let me just try that again. So I'm just going to pull out from here, click, get it back, it'll just twist. System's running a little slow on this. That's it. Click on there, hit the middle circle, hold down shift, and just pull that up. So if you imagine if the floor tiles say about that sort of amount. Okay, and I'm going to flip that back. I'm going to go back into draw mode. I'm going to flip this backwards. Let me turn off the polyframes, it's not liking it. There we go. So I'm going to turn that backwards. I'm going to zoom out, just make sure I press F. So it is still it's all constrained, we're okay there. Back to half and half. So now what we've got, as you can see, because I'm using a matte cap white, I've filled the entire canvas with that. So if, for example, if I needed to do that, I just go to matte cap white. I'm on a white colour. I'm going to go to colour, fill object, and that's filled that entire object. I've also put it on here on my custom UI shelf. So now what we've got the tiles sticking outwards, the grout's being left behind, and we've still got the edge loop, which is brilliant. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to isolate. In fact, no, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a layer. Now that's just bugging me, so I'm just going to turn that off. I'm going to create a layer now, because I'm going to add in the small indentations within the top of the tiles. So I'm going to create a layer, so it gives me more control. I'm also going to store a morph target. So I'm going to be using, as you can probably see, I've already got it highlighted there, the morph brush. So when I store a morph target, anything on the canvas now, it's going to remember that as a snapshot. So if I went crazy and started pulling everything around, I could use the morph brush, or I could switch back to the original state, this state, and it'll go back. So that's going to be useful for getting some variation within the actual tiles themselves, because we don't want it on every tile, we just want to give it a slight variation. So I'm going to close down. We've stored a morph target and we've got a layer, so we've got a couple of backups for the layer as well. Now the next thing to do is I'm going to just isolate this poly group here. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and click, and now we're only going to affect the top of the tiles, the ones that we pulled outwards, okay, because everything else is hidden. So if I go to noise, and as you can see I've already got this zoomed in when I was looking at it earlier. So at the moment we've got some noise on there, but it looks more like bricks, kind of the noise you'd have for bricks. But I don't want that, so let's just change this slightly. So I'm going to pull up this slider and I'm going to bring it to halfway. Again, on Bad King AU they say that this is the sweet spot. Whenever you're doing any surface noise, you can find that sometimes when you apply it, it kind of makes the mesh puff outwards, it kind of bulges it up, and that's because it's going higher or lower than the sweet spot, and that's the sweet spot right in the middle there. So I've just also turned down its influence radius, so I just want that point there. I'm going to grab another point, but I'm going to pull off the canvas, keeping hold of the left mouse button and not letting go, and bringing it back, and now we've got an actual sharp point, so that's a lot better. So I can use this here. I'm going to create another one, so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to pull this out and pull this back. You can probably see it's slightly changing on the actual mesh itself. I'm going to increase the scale just slightly, so as you can see we've got some scale going on. I'm going to just give it some randomization and some offsets as such. Just do that again. Remember, we're going to use the morph brush, so we don't have to get this exactly right. So we've got some slight pits and dints inwards. If I pull it to the left, you can see we get more. Pull it to the right, we get a few less. So we don't want to go nuts, we want something kind of like that. And we're pretty much near that middle sweet spot again. I don't need to touch anything else here, and all I'm going to do is just go OK, and then I'm going to apply that to that mesh, and that'll apply to the mesh. I'm going to press Control and Shift and click outside the canvas and bring everything back. So now if I zoom in there, we can see we've got some of these small dints and dimples and everything, which is awesome. Alright, okay, so I'm going to zoom that back again. I'm going to press F to frame it, and then AA half again, so we've got that there. Now those, as I say, those dints and small crevices in there, that's going to be extremely useful for the roughness, so that when the highlight goes over the top of the tiles, it's going to give it some variation and it's going to look really, really nice. So next thing to do, we've got that layer select. If I'm going to click that, no, I have to click in there. There we go. Click in there. And what I could have done with this layer is, if I zoom in again, I can bring down the strength of those. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it at 100%, and that's just a safety marker. That's just a safety belt, if you wish. Now I'm going to bake all that down. Now normally I save all my layers, but it's been crashing this morning for some reason, so I'm just going to bake this layer down. So I'm going to bake that down. I'm going to frame it again, zoom out. I'm so used to doing that. So for zoom out and anti-aliasing half. Now, because I've got the morph targets stored here, I'm going to go in now with this morph brush. Now I've got it there. You can also click on here, and I think it's where it's there. So I've got the morph brush. I don't want to affect any of the actual coloration, I just want to affect what we're going to be seeing with the sculpting. So I'm going to bring its Z intensity down a little bit, and you can see we've got these dits and small pits. Now as you can see, as I'm just going over there, I'm even doing it with my mouse, I've not even got my Wacom on this at all, so I'm just going to move this around. Let's have a look, zoom into this part, and what you want to do is you just want to go around and just create variation. That's all you want to do. Just keep going round. You can do it a bit further out if you wish. Just go around, and you don't want it everywhere. You want it to be unique, so that when the light brushes over the top, it's going to look awesome. Okay, so I'm going to zoom that out again, and I'm going to frame that up, and I'm going to do that again. And then now what I want to do is I'm going to delete that morph target, and I'm going to store another morph target. So now we're at this point. Okay, and again I'm going to create a layer as just a safety net and a bit of a backup. And what I'm going to do this time is I want to isolate the grout. So I'm gonna do Control and Shift and click on the white tiles, and then I'm going to do it again, and that's going to bring me back to those two polygroups. Now there's two polygroups there, so we just want to make those as one. So I'm just going to group visible. So now I've no longer got my edge loop, but it doesn't matter because I'm not going to be doing any smoothing or anything like that. All I want to do now is just affect the actual grout within the tiles. So it's the same procedure again. Okay, so we've got as layer, we've got as, in fact what I'll do is the morph target, I'm going to delete that and I'm going to store it again since I did the poly grouping. And then I'm going to go back to surface, and I'm going to click noise and edit. And now let's have a look here. Now with the grouting, let's make something slightly different because it wants to be a bit more rougher. Let's have a look, let's increase some of the scale just slightly. And pull that across and maybe something like that. I mean, you just got to get in there and just have a play yourself, and it's going to be good because there's going to be slight variation in the grout wherever it goes there, because you can see it. And again, I'm going to click apply to mesh. So there you go, it's applied to mesh. And you can see how it's really pulled it outwards because I moved the sliders higher than the middle point, and you can see that how it's pulled it out so much. So if I now go just click Control and Shift outside the canvas, we've got the grout, and it doesn't really matter that it puffed out really. In fact, some of it's quite nice there, but it's a little bit too much for me. So I'm just going to click in here to use the layer this time. So now I'm just going to use this layer, and I'm going to pull it downwards just slightly. So now when I look at the mesh again, let's have a look, just bringing a little bit into it. There we go. And again, what you could do from this point is I'm going to bake that down, and we've got his morph target still stored, and I can go in and then I can even start to give a bit more randomization, and it'll be doing it as well on the tiles and on the grout. All I've done from there is I exported out that plane and then went into XNormal, and using just a flat plane as well, I baked out a normal map out of that. So another way you could do it is you could actually use this normal RGB material here, and you could then go up to document and ZApp, and then you could create a normal from there, make sure it's normalized, and then we can get on to the next part. So you can either use XNormal, or you can do it using ZBrush's normal RGB material. We've now, this is baked out of XNormal, so this is one from previous that I've done previously. So I baked this out in XNormal, and I brought it into here. Now you don't have to normalize the normal map, but it's always a good procedure to just go XNormal, normalize normal map, just to make sure that everything's within 0 to 1. Okay, so we've got everything we need there. Now you can then just bring that straight into Substance Designer, which is a good idea, and then from there you've got your base normal map and everything. But you can also generate in Substance Designer, for example, the ambient occlusion, convexity, curvature, and all those maps as well. But what I want to show you today is another program that I use a lot, and I really do like it. I like the control that I get with it, and it's called Knald, by Knald Technologies. And this is an awesome application, because what it can do is it can bake out maps using the GPU, so it's extremely quick. So if I just pull this 3D view, I've already done a tutorial on this on Eat 3D, so if you want to learn how to use Knald, I really do recommend it. It gives you a lot of control, and it's just another tool in the arsenal of poly pushing or pixel pushing, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so what I've done is I just imported in the normal map there, and that brought the normal map in. And then, as you can see with this normal map, there is some slight anomalies on here where this was one of the previous tests where I'd accidentally got a bit too crazy with the morph brush and got rid of some of the details. But trust me, in the final one, it's actually correct. So what you can do is you import that, and now there's a maximum iterations button here, and I just pull that slider right to the top, and it'll sort out the amount of iterations that it needs to process that normal map, and that works out 607. So I just normally, doesn't matter if it says 1000 there, I just make sure it's 607 there. Okay, so that's a height map. So we've got another height map, which would be good to use as a mask. We've also got a bump scale, so I can increase the strength of that normal map there. Okay, so you could either do it in here, or you can do that in Substance Designer, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so then another great thing is I've got this AO scale, so I can use this again to perhaps use as an ambient occlusion or overlay to use as a mask or something. The more black and white imagery you've got, and it's quite unique and diverse, instead of procedurally generating in Substance Designer, if you want a balance between having things that such as shapes and patterns that are procedurally created in Substance Designer, that's awesome because it's good for speed. This as well, it gives you even more opportunity to use them as masks, which you'll see in a second. So I've got an ambient occlusion scale, so I can pull it down, or I can decide how much ambient occlusion I want in that. Now obviously with these tiles it wouldn't be a lot, but we can use this as a mask. Again, for the cavity map as well, we can do that again. I've got a cavity scale, so I can pull that down or pull that up, and again I can use this for different techniques when blending in tones in Substance Designer. We've got the convexity for the edges, as you can see there. Now there's a blur amount, so I can pull that blur amount down. Stabilization, not really use that, but there we go. But we've got the contrast. So in effect then we've got all these maps. So we can export all those maps, and then we can use these also in Substance Designer. But to just make you aware, you can bake these maps as well in Substance Designer using the meshes, the high poly and the low poly. But I just wanted to show you Knald as well, because it gives you another option if you wish to use it, and it's real-time updating as well, which is brilliant. So from this point, let's actually get into Substance Designer. Now, I'm not going to run through putting every node together and how things are created, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what is happening with each of these nodes and why I've actually put the nodes in this order and what they actually do. First thing is when you boot up Substance Designer, it'll say, do you want to create a new substance, or do you want to look at some tutorials and whatnot? Awesome tutorials on Algorithmic's YouTube channel. Definitely check them out, because there's a lot of information there about FX maps for creating, such as generators, such as noises and patterns, such as these. They show you how to do things like that, and also the basics of using this and how awesome this is. Okay, so what you need to do is, if for example, if you came in there and you didn't have the splash screen up, you click on the plus button, and we pick, I'm going to be using physically based rendering, and it's going to be metallic and roughness. So for the metallics, if the map is white, it's a metal; if it's black, it's not. And the roughness on this occasion will be, if it's black, it's really shiny, and if it's very rough, it will be white. Okay, and then I'm going to change that to 2048 by 2048. I've already done this, as you can see, but that's what I do. I just change that 2048 2048, leave it absolute, and I also add in another output. Just click add output, and this is where you can add further ones. So say I want an ambient occlusion, so I create that, and then just name the graph whatever you wish. And then I'm not going to do that now because I've already done that, and then that will show up here. Okay, and what you can do from this point is, if I just bring resources up, when you're on the top T, you can then go in and save that, file save, or I'm calling it tiles, for example. Now this is still a work in progress, this is not finished, but I thought I'd show you at this point. If I right click the top level there, the parent, I can go to import bitmap or vector graphics if I wish. I can also export as a substance, publish as a substance as well, and export with dependencies. So the dependencies would be sort of the maps that you imported in the maps it's using. So what I've done is I've gone in and I've imported in let's have a look. So I've imported in the original height map that we had in Photoshop before we started any of this, because that's still good as a base because it gives me a little bit of control. And then what I've also done is I've imported in the normal map that we created from ZBrush, and all I'm doing here is I'm using a node called a height normal blender. Okay, so what I'm attempting to do here is I'm attempting to overlay the normal map I created in ZBrush over the original height map. Now you might say, well, what's the point in that? Well, the reason is that's got all that small fine surface detail, and it's got all the grout that's been created, and we're getting the benefit of having a bit more control because we've still got the base height map itself for the forms. Okay, so what I'm doing then is, so the height and normal blender, where does that reside? Well, if you type in norm, for example, you can see here we've got height normal blender, and it's there, height normal blender. You just left click and you just drag it in. Okay. Now if you ever need to know what's going on with each node, you just click on there and it'll show you here. Now, what you might find is when you bake something out and you've not flipped the Y channel, i.e. it might be in OpenGL or it might be in DirectX. If it's OpenGL, it's going to be plus Y. You may find that A, it's not looking like a physically based rendered scene for some reason, and also B, you might find that the normals are flipped the other way around. So there's a quick way to sort this out. Before you start creating any of these nodes, just make sure down here. So I'll go to Scene, and then I just normally reset lights, reset environment. You can reset all. In fact, if I do that, I can show you this. So it's going to reset absolutely everything. I'm just going to right click in here and view outputs in 3D. So it's going to bring that back for me. So there we are. So if you don't want to see the grid, just click on display and turn off the grid. If you don't want to see the actual scene itself, if you click on edit here, you can see visible in viewport. So I'm just going to click that, and now it's false. So we don't have to see that. You can change the exposure, rotation of the background image. You can even give it some background color, different ambient colors and whatnot. Normally I just go in there and just turn off visible in viewport if I don't want to be distracted by the background. Next thing to look at is the materials. You want to make sure that the shader is on physically based. It could be physically based specular and glossiness, which was the other option that you can use to create a physical based texture. But I'm using the roughness and metallic, so I'm just going to click on physically based. Another thing that can trip you up as well is the normals being flipped the other way. So if you click edit, it says DirectX normal true. When I baked this out, it was for OpenGL, so it's not true. So I'm just going to click false, and you can see how it changes. And because the Y is in a positive, it's OpenGL, so there you'll see that it's correct. If in doubt, click that, and you'll be able to tell when it's correct. But normally, when I bake stuff out, I normally bake it out as OpenGL. But I do know that CryEngine and Unreal Engine 4, they use DirectX. So just to make you aware. So right, so by that point you know that your 3D view's alright and it's correct. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this bitmap image. So if I double click, it'll show you in the preview window here. So that's that original bitmap image that I used to take into ZBrush. This is my ZBrush normal map. If you click this button here, it'll just scale it to the window. It's very subtle indeed. But what I'm doing is I'm blending this map with that from ZBrush, and I'm making sure it's on OpenGL format because that's what I'm working in. And then there's an intensity slider, and I can pull this intensity up or down, and you'll be able to see we get the best of both worlds. We're getting the good structure of the actual height map itself, and we're also getting all these small dimples and everything, and the grout that we created in ZBrush. Awesome, best of both worlds. Now, what's happening here is I've got another version of this bitmap. You have to import it twice because you can edit a bitmap. But if I show you, if I click on here, you can see a little brush icon shows, and really what you got to think of this is it's a mask, like in Photoshop. So white you see it, black you don't. So what I'm doing here is to give even more variation into this normal map. If I double click this, you can see we've now got a few scratches. It might just be very subtle. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like kind of scratches and things, and that is coming from this here. Now what this is a grunge map. So if I double click on this, all this is doing, it's just adding on all these kind of noisy details and all these kind of scratches and lines. So as you can see, you don't even need to go into ZBrush if you don't want to. You could actually create just using these generators, these noises and patterns. You can create your own noises and patterns, or bring in your own scratches, decals for example, height maps, whatever you want to call it. Bring them in and you can make a normal map out of them, and it's going to look awesome. You've got a lot of control. But I still like going into ZBrush because I do like the control that I get for if I was placing each tile down. I can make sure it's in really nice places. I might want to, because this is a clean variant, what I'm going to do is create an actual damage variant that you could blend over the top using a height map. So then you'd have like certain parts would be cracked and other parts would be clean. A lot of games texturing uses that because it breaks up the tiling texture. So on one of this could be one tiling texture, and then there'll be another one exactly the same but with lots of cracks, and perhaps it's chipped away and there's only parts and you can see more of the grout, and then you blend the two together in certain areas and that gets rid of that tiling texture, the kind of tiling anomaly that you used to see in old games where you could just tell how it tiles across, like the patterns would be exactly the same. So what we can do is I'm going to add in all these like further scratches, because these scratches were not in ZBrush but they are in here, because I'm just using it as even more surface variation, and we're using it in the roughness map, which I'll come to again in a while. So we've got this instance of this grunge map. This grunge map is found under noises. As you can see if I scroll down, there's quite a few. The key, I think, to texturing is experimentation. As long as you know the basics of what you're trying to achieve and the basics of getting the form, after that, world's your oyster, because you can do whatever you want. You can start to really overlay things and experiment, and then that's how you learn and really push textures to the next level. So what I'm doing is I'm taking those scratches, but I don't want to add them on every single part of this tile. I don't want them in the grout, I just want them on top, but I only want them in certain areas. So what I've done is I've imported this bitmap again, so you can see in here I've got two. I've got one there and one here, because if I paint on that one it's going to affect every one of that version of the bitmap. So I've just brought another one in, and what I've done is I've double clicked on here. I've got the brush out. If I right click, I think if I right click on the actual, that's it. If I right click on the actual canvas, I can change the side hardness and change the different brush settings. But what I'm going to do is, as you can see, it's already doing a couple there. If I just do Control and Z, I can get back. So all I've gone in and done is made sure I was on black, because I don't want it to be seen, and I'm just going in and just painting out parts that I don't want to see. Like that. You could blend in another texture if you wished onto this to give it more of a natural kind of feeling where it's masked in and out. That's another option. But with this one I wanted to make sure that I've got these kind of tiles and making sure that the scratches aren't going into the tiles. So what did I do from there? I took that texture there, which is, just think of it now as a mask. Don't think of it as a height map, think of it as a mask. And I'm saying I want to blend the scratches with this mask, not a height map, a mask. Okay, so this is going into here, which is a blend node. If I click on the canvas, just press space, you can see there's an option for a blend node. So what the blend node is going to do is exactly what it says on the tin. It's going to blend between two textures, and what is blending between here? It's blending between the scratches on top and the base of the actual tiles themselves. I hope this is making sense. So if I double click on this, you can see I can go over here, because whenever you click on a node, all its details always come up over here. So if I pull the opacity down, you should start to see it. Actually, you won't see it change. If I didn't have that mask plugged into this opacity slot, for example, if I take that out, as you can see now, it's just all the scratches, and you can't see any of the bottom, because that is the foreground. When I highlight over the top, it says foreground. Now, if you're not seeing any of these small pointers or helpful hints, it's somewhere in here, somewhere or other. Is it information? Yeah, display connector name. You just need to tick that under the eye. Okay, so then you can see what's going on. So that's the foreground. This is the background. And I'm just going to pull. I'm going to click on the node, and I'm just going to pull the opacity down, and you'll start to see it starts to go the other way. Look, if you look in this viewport here, you can start to see it was going the other way now. It's working on a black and white mask. Sorry, it's working on a black and white mask. When it's fully white at 1, it's showing the foreground. When it's fully black, it's showing the background, and it's doing a scale between white and black. And that's exactly why we're creating this. White and black. So if I plug this into this slot here, instead of using the opacity slider, it's going to use a mask, and there you go. It's going to go straight in, and then you've got your blending between this and this, but it's using this as a mask. I hope that makes sense. So now we've got this blend node. So now ignore these lines coming out of it for now. We're just working on the normal map. great way to work in Substance Designer. Don't just dive in and start doing each map all at the same time, because you're going to start getting confused. Well, I do anyway. So what I do first is I normally work on the normal map, because that's going to give me my form. It gives me my forms before I start actually applying the colour and texture. So I'm pulling this one out of this blend node, and it's going into another height and normal blend node. Same as that one, another one. So if you needed to find it, you go, just type in norm, and there you go, height normal blender. I mean, the name says it all, so it's pretty cool from there. You can also make it a favourite, and then you get a little favourites tab, and you can see I've got a few favourites in there at the moment. I've reinstalled, so I'm missing quite a few, and a few bespoke ones as well, but I'm cool for now. This is how simple it is. So in this one, make sure it's OpenGL, and this is such a tiny normal intensity, but it does make a lot of difference. You don't want to be going in and applying just unless you're looking for that really smashed in look. But with the scratches, I want them to be more the surface, like someone's walked over with stiletto heels or something like that, with the shoes, and there's been little stones in the shoes, and it's kind of scratched the surface of the tiles. So then, what I'm doing from that point is, I'm also adding in another texture, well, noise pattern really, into the height map, into the normal map again. And what this is doing is, now it's pretty hard to see it, but it's coming from this. As you can see, it's just like a black and white cloud, so where it's white, it's going to be kind of sticking up. Just think of them like a height map as well. Think of them as masks and height maps. So this is a height map this time I'm using it for. You don't have to tell it that, but this is what I'm using it for. White, it's going to stick out, black, it's going to go down. And I'm using this extremely subtly, again, into another height map normal blender, because I'm bringing in a height map and I'm blending in the normal from there, and I'm going in, and as you can see, it's really subtle. You can't really see it. You see it more when the actual light shines over it. If I double click on this, it's at a really low level. If I for example ramp this up, you'll start to see it. You can really see it starting to get, looks like leather. It's a bit strange, but all I'm using that for is, I mean, you might not even see it, but I'm using it for just to subtly just break it up a little bit. Just a little bit. Don't want it looking like leather. So, but I do want it to kind of have that feeling that it's not perfectly like glass, and it's not perfectly straight. There's slight indentations in it. And this is where the power of Substance Designer comes in, because then what I could say is, oh, I want something else in there. So then I just get another height normal blender, and I put that in. I could even blend between two normal maps. There's a normal combine, there's a normal blend. And that's just going to go between two normal maps. So you might have another normal map you've already created, and you want to blend those in together, and then you can do that. What it really matters is, this is your output, this is your end result. Everything's just plugging into there for the normal map. And that, at the minute, is what the normal map looks like, and that's what it's looking like in the scene. Okay, so really, what we've done there is, let's just break this up. So, to make that normal map, it's just took that node there, and these here, and that's just been outputted to there. Now you're probably wondering why this one's coming out of this one here. The reason for that is I didn't want any of the kind of bumpiness into the ambient occlusion. Now what I'm doing here is, you could generate an ambient occlusion out of, as we saw in Knald, but what I'm doing here is, again, I'm just using the same height map. Now to save on nodes, I could drag it from here. In fact, I'll do that now. So if I drag that across, because normally what I do is, once I've finished an actual substance, I'll go in and see where I can optimize it. Nothing's changed. It's still the same. I was just being wasteful, so I'll just click delete on that one, and we've got it back to here. What I'm doing this time is, I've got a bit of a normal because I've got lots of scratches and things. I'm going to start bringing in a little ambient occlusion into that. It's very small, the scratches. It's probably better to do a cavity actually, but I may change that to a cavity. But at the moment I've got it as a height. So that's just created a height, OpenGL format, global opacity, and you can see this is what it looks like here. It's also quite nice because on top it's adding a little bit of darkness, but it's kind of giving a few little lightish areas. And it's the same blend node again. Just press the space bar, you get a list of things you can use, and again it's just a blend node there, and that's going into the ambient occlusion, and the ambient occlusion looks like that. So it's quite dark in the crevices. It might be a little bit too dark in those crevices, and it might need a little variation from the grout. Could do with a little bit of variation there. But again, that's something that you can look at the end, which is cool. The next thing I normally do from there, I don't really worry about roughness at this point. So this is the roughness section, which is affecting where it's going to be shiny and where it's going to be kind of dull. So black is super shiny, white is very dull indeed. So where might be where the dirt is, and you can see how it kind of changes as I go across the surface. It's changing from the actual shininess where it's hitting the darks and where it's not so dirty, to where the scratches are, where it's going to be the light's going in there and it's bouncing around, and it's just making it a rough surface. Okay, but I'm not going to move on to that for now. I'm going to leave that to one section. In fact, I'm going to drag this out of the way just for now. Right, so the next thing that I've done is I wanted to start to create the actual texture itself. Now, I've not used at all any photo reference in this. I've got to the point now where using Substance Designer, I don't really need to have pictures of concrete with all the lighting took out and all things like that. In effect, we can do this now with just colours and gradient maps. I mean, you could do it before in Photoshop with just colours and gradient maps, but it was a bit of a pain, and you didn't really get to see the output of it as quickly as you can now, just within this 3D view. So, as you'll see, as I go through these nodes, there's no photos anymore, no photo references, which is great, because when you're making a physically based rendering texture, there's a few key things that you need to remember, and the one key thing is in the albedo map, which used to be the diffuse, and it's now called albedo. The reason I call it albedo is because it doesn't want any shadows in it, doesn't want any cavity. Well, you can have very small cavity information in there, but you don't want ambient occlusion in it at all. It wants to be completely stripped, and that's why when you're using photographic imagery, it can be difficult. Algorithmics just brought out an awesome new version of bitmap to material, which I do recommend you looking at if you do want to use photo textures for stripping out lighting. It can also be done using lab color, and each studio have different ways of removing lighting from imagery. There's also another great one about taking photographic imagery by Bradford Smith. That's brand new on Eat 3D. Tells you if you are going to take your own photos for texturing, how to get rid of the shadows and make sure you've got a very consistent luminance and it looks really nice. Worth checking that out as well. So let's have a look at the actual albedo map. So let me just grab this. So I'm just gonna, there we go. Just so we can differentiate what's happening. It might look intimidating, but it's not. It's pretty simple. Again, all I'm doing is I'm just using these generators and masks and just making my own FX maps and just creating all these different masks, because they're not height maps anymore. Don't think of these as height maps. Think of these as masks. So where it's white, you're going to see it, and where it's black, you're not going to see it. Okay, so all I've done is I've gone into noises and I've just picked, what is it, Grunge Map 011, so I think it's one of these, that one, Grunge Map 11, and all I've done again is just drag that into there. What am I using this for? I'm using this for the actual grout, because the actual colour of the tiles, the main tiles, starts here, but what I'm doing here is I'm using these two to blend a couple of lighter tones and darker tones, and I'm bringing them into this blend node. And as you can see, when I bring in the blend node, it's being driven again by an opacity slot using that grunge map out of there. So where it's white, you're going to see this colour, where it's black, you're going to see this colour, and where it kind of transitions between the whites and the blacks in the grey areas, you're going to get a mix of both colours. And there, straight away, I've not used any photo or anything like that. All I've got, I mean, you could even add in more tones and colours, but you're not really going to see it that much. It is quite hidden within the cracks, and with the ambient occlusions on the dirt over the top and things, it's going to get quite hidden. But we know it's there, I know it's there, that we're blending in these two colours to get different highlights and shadows, and you can probably kind of see it there within the actual grout. Might need brightening up a little bit, and again, that's not a problem to do. within Substance Designer. So what we're doing then, we're just blending those two together, and we're blending that into here. Okay, and also that's going into our roughness down here. So in effect, that is now completely over the texture itself. Okay, if I was to cut these noodles, as I call them, you would then find that that would just be a representation of that with a normal map. Okay, so then the next part, what we want to do is we want to isolate where the actual main tiles are. So what I'm doing now is I've got another blend, because this is pretty much it. You're just using blend nodes as you're going through, just to blend things together like you would do in Photoshop. If you imagine this is just a layer stack in Photoshop. If you've ever done any texturing in Photoshop, this is just a layer stack. And all this, it's just a visual representation of it. So where you might put that might be over the top of this, okay, we might just put that as an overlay or an add or soft light or whatever over the top of this blend, and then we get the blend together. That's all this is. It looks more intimidating than it actually is. So but what I want to do this time is I want to use the mask again, but this time I want to say that where it's going to be black, and we're just using that one height map again, just that. Where it's white we'll see it, where it's black it's not, where it's white it's foreground, where it's black it's background. And that's all that's doing. It's going straight into the foreground, so where it's white off this map here, it's going to show, if I double click it, yep, you can see it's just going to show the actual top of the tiles, and where the grout is, it's where it's black in the actual texture, is where you're going to see the grout in between. Simple as that, absolutely doddle. No problems at all. Now this is where it starts getting more interesting, because now what I want to do is, it'd be pretty boring and bland if we just had this one texture like this with the grout in between. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding in tones and different colours and variations and ground dirt, and this is where the experimentation comes in. When I start any texture, I know what I want to achieve, but sometimes I don't know how I'm going to go about it. I know the basics of it, but then this is where the fun starts, because now we can just start messing around with all these different generators. So for example, I wanted to add over the top this time some more of these kind of scratches and grunges, but this time I'm using it to colour. If I double click here, another blend, it's the same again, it's just another blend, where those scratches are within the actual normal map. And it's simple. All we need to do is, if we remember down here, this is what we used to create the actual normal map dints and variations, as we can see in there. I can use that same mask again. It's been used as a height map here, but it's been used as a mask up here. So that's why you can have more than one noodle coming out of one bowl, as I call it again. So you've got your node output there, or your bowl, and these are your noodles, and the noodles are going straight up. And this time it's going into something called a gradient map. There's one rule in Substance Designer, and it's for any image-based rendering or anything. The yellow noodles, the curry version, is RGB. Okay, so that's the red, green, and blue, and the grey ones are for grayscale images. As you can see, there's a thing between grayscale and colour. Great way to show you that is the metalness map, because there's no metal in this at all, it's just black, so it's just a uniform colour. When I press spacebar and I go down to uniform colour, it comes in as curry flavoured noodles, it comes in as RGB. Okay, right, that's why it's yellow. And as you can see, I can change it to grayscale and then it'll go grey. And that means if there's an input, for example, if I take this one out and I'm going to do the metallic map again, right? If I plug, you can see you can either have curry or just plain noodles in this bowl, right? RGB or just a grayscale image. We've converted that to a grayscale image by just pressing the button there, and you can see we've got a slider, so I can change the actual colour of the actual grayscale map itself. It's just a colour, uniform colour. I'm going to plug the noodle into there, and we've got black. So that's correct for this, because we're saying there's nothing metal in this, so it's just going to be all black. Say if it was, if I click in the uniform colour and pull it up to white, You can see, oh, it goes weird. It's like sci-fi, woo, you know, that sort of malarkey. But I don't need that. I just want it to be black. Now, for example, this is a 2048 by 2048 image. It doesn't even need to be that big. If I pull it back down to black, I can just change its size. I mean, I'll change it to something really small. I mean, just -12, 1 by 1. I don't know. Yeah, just leave it at that. Doesn't matter, because in the end, we're just wanting to have just a black colour. Which, if you're using Unreal Engine 4, you wouldn't even generate this map out of it. You just plug in a constant or whatever and just give it the black colour, and then you're cool. You're sorted. Okay, but what I'll do is I'll just bring that just back up to where it was just for now. No, like I said, no great deal, doesn't matter. So then, in effect, we've got rid of the metallic map. So we've created the metallic map, we've got the ambient occlusion, we've got the normal. I'll leave in the roughness to the end. And so, back to why. So we've got curry flavour going in, RGB, but that mask there is just your generic noodly flavour, so it's grey, so it's grayscale. So we need to convert that from grayscale into the actual RGB one. So if I click on the back of the canvas, press the spacebar, there's a node here called gradient map, and that converts the grayscale into RGB so that it can be plugged in to the blend node. If this was grayscale and I was plugging in a grayscale into there, you wouldn't need this. I could just go straight in. You can either have 2 grayscales or 2 RGBs. You can't mix and match. And that's how we get around it. So what if it was the other way? What if it was RGB and I went to go to grayscale? All I need to do is press spacebar, and there's a grayscale conversion, and you can just see the noodle balls are the different way around. We've got RGB going in, and that'll do a grayscale going out. So yeah, as you can see, what we're doing at this point then is, where we had the scratches in the actual normal map, we're using as a height map. I've now come out of it up here, converted it to RGB, and it's going into this blend node. And if I zoom out, if I just press this button here, you can see now I've got where the scratches are, I've got this kind of black dirt and everything. Now, what's controlling this? Because we don't want these scratches all over the place, because we've already defined by this map that we created. When we were plugging in the scratches into here, we told it where we wanted it to actually be placed, where it's white and where it's black we don't. So because we're just colouring in the scratches, if I didn't apply that into the mask, i.e. we want to reuse that mask, if I haven't plugged that into this blend node here, then it's going to be absolutely everywhere, and it's not going to look right. It's going to look pretty crazy, to be honest. So when I plug this one straight into there, in fact I can show you. Right, if I plug this mask just straight into here, this is whoa, see, it's gone really, it's like it's overkill. I don't want it that dark. I mean, it might do. I mean, it might be something that you're looking at, but no, I don't want it that dark. So what I've done here is I've created levels, and again, if you're used to Photoshop, you'll be used to like the levels, the histogram here, just pulling the sliders. Here I'm just crushing some of the whites. As you can see, it's just pulling down the amount of white. So as we know, white you see is seen as the opaque, and the black is transparent, and then you get sort of the degrees between the white and the black. So when I'm pulling this down, as you can see, it's making it darker, and in effect when I plug this into here now, you'll see they've gone. This is how we can control how much of the dirt we want coming through. So if I want to show more, I can just pull up the slider, and you can see there's more coming in, but I don't want that. I want it to be subtle. Whenever I'm doing texturing, I try and keep it as subtle as I possibly can, because if it's going to be a tiling texture, try to avoid anything that will look quite repeated, even though you can use the blending to get away with it, using the blend masks and painting into textures. It's still good practice to try and not have too much repetition, or anything that sticks out, really catches your eye, because it's just going to be seen over and over again as you walk down, say, a street or something like that in a game. So now we've got us scratches in the normal map, and we've also coloured them, and it couldn't be simpler. It's, in fact, we've not even used another map. We've just converted the grayscale noise into RGB and input it into there. Okay, and we've put it on blending mode of multiply. Again, like a Photoshop layer stack, you've got sort of like multiply screen and all that, overlay and whatever. you can just change the blending mode here so it blends in. With multiply, it's going to keep the blacks and get rid of the whites. So because that blend is on multiply, it's keeping the black scratches and getting rid of the white. And then we're using the mask to drive where we actually want it, and a levels command to tell it exactly how much of the black needs to show through. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's move on to the next part. So the next part is I'm starting to add more, let's say, ground dirt and surface, just different coloration into the actual texture itself. So you can just see it here, and that again is just from clouds noises, which is just a bit further up somewhere. I think was it 2? Yeah, it's that one. All again, just drag that one into there, and now again we know the principle of this, because what we want to do is we can't plug it into here because that's RGB. So we need to ensure that whatever we output is going to be RGB again. So I'm just creating a clouds, I'm pressing the space bar, grabbing a gradient map node, and plugging that into the gradient map, and then I'm taking that gradient map and I'm putting it into a transform 2D. Now this is a different one. Now as you can see here, what I've done is I've kind of zoomed in on the image where you can see the square there. I've actually zoomed in on the image so that I can kind of get it tiling. So it's, well, it would tile anyway, but I want extra. I want less amount in there. So to get a transform 2D node, you press the space bar again. Everything's normally under the space bar if it's not just search for it in here or look in filters, materials, or mesh adaptive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a transformation 2D node. So I want to transform this. But again, I need it to be RGB because we need to output RGB. So I've got my gradient and I've got my transform map. Okay, and when you click on a node, it always gives you all the nodes options here: bilinear, filtering, map levels. You can offset the actual text. You can see how it's moving across. So if I want to offset that, you can see it's changing real time in there as well. I can also divide by 2 or times by 2 to bring it back up. We can also change the angle and rotation of it, so I could go 90 degrees counterclockwise or 90 degrees clockwise to bring it back. You can just see it's just changing. So again, this is giving you even more options because you can start to transform any of these bitmap images here. Sorry, these generators and images. So you can use that to transform things around. You can even use the actual pulleys here and twist them round like you can do in Photoshop and things, but I normally like to keep things quite uniform, and I normally do things in here. So that is just like you scale, rotate and whatever in Photoshop. That's coming out of there and we're blending it on top, and then that's just going back in, and that there is just giving some extra variation to it. I've put it on a multiply, so the blacks will stay and the whites will be pretty much gone. But it just adds a little bit more into there. I mean, what I could do from that point, I could have took this transform node here. If I click here and do a levels, I could have plugged the levels into there, and at the top, run out of space. Then double click on here, and then as you can see, as it's changing, I can bring in more of the dirt, or I can bring it back out. I didn't mind it being quite generic. If I look now, you can kind of see an overview. If I pull it out a little bit, brightens it, it's not too bad. Might leave that for now actually, just for the fun of it. Okay, so that's creating just even more just slight variation on the surface, as we can see in the texture itself. Now what I'm doing is I always like to add some cool kind of colours, coolness colours in there if I've got a lot of warms and warm colours. So this is just to slightly give it some sort of contrast between feeling either too warm or too cold, or kind of the cold hues as such. So what I'm doing this time is I'm putting that in the background, into the background slot, and I'm putting the main one on into the top slot, into this blend node here. I'm leaving it on copy, so that's just the generic what it is, because it's not being driven by the opacity slider, it's being driven by this transform 2D, and this transform 2D is just coming straight out of that levels command. It's going into it's from It's actually coming out of, where can I find it? Sorry about this. It's coming out of this one. So it's coming out of the original clouds because it's grayscale. So we need it to be grayscale to be a mask in the opacity slot. So I'm ignoring all the gradient maps this time and all the transform 2Ds. I'll just create that new levels, but ignore that for now. And I'm just coming straight out of this cloud, so it's going straight across, and it's going into here. And again, I'm controlling the levels on it because I don't want these blues to be absolutely everywhere. Now, I've even crushed a lot of the darks, so I've got quite a small range. If I pull it back, we'll start to see a lot of these blue tones coming in. So I'm just bringing it up a little bit to kind of crush some of the colour information, but I'm still getting some of the blue hints and tinges within it. And as you can see, that's been plugged into there from that transform 2D. Now that's also been applied onto the grout, so I really need to kind of look at that and decide, do I want some blues in that grout, or do I want to just have it on the actual top of the tiles? So it may be that I need to use a blend in another mask into here like we did previously, using this one here, or even that one, just to blend in so that I can stop it from going into the actual grout, and it's then just applied on top. Once you start actually using Substance Designer and really getting in there and using all of these kind of like inputs and everything, it becomes really easy. It looks intimidating, and when I talk about, say, blending in another mask into that, it's not a problem at all. And the great thing is with it, you can't break it. You can't go in there and then not get back to something that you were doing or whatever. Just save out the substance at a certain point, and then you could save it as something else if you want to stop at this point and then you want to try something more and add in on variation. So really, you've got to just go in there, experiment. I mean, I can talk you through it like this, but you really do need to go in there and just try something simple, something basic. Doesn't have to be crazy. Even just practicing blending colours together just to get a final output, I mean, that'd be cool. Now this is running it over an hour, so I'll just be a bit quicker now. But then what I wanted to do is add in even further variation into it, and this looks really wild and wacky. Looks a bit like sick, but oh, well, we're not sure about the blue bits, but anyway. So yeah, I've just used another mask, kind of like a fractal sum one. Again, it's just, I could use something different. I could have used the clouds or something, but just went through and tried different ones and see what it would give me. What I'm doing this time is I'm plugging this fractal sum into the gradient map, so it's like we're changing it to RGB. But another step, I've actually gone into the gradient editor this time. Normally we're just going in and we're just converting it from the actual grayscale to the RGB. This time I'm converting it from a grayscale into an RGB, but what I'm doing is I'm adding colours in as well at the same time to kind of colorize this fractal sum. So if I go to gradient editor, you can see we've got all these sliders, and it's the same kind of thing as you have in Photoshop as well. Click on there, you can change the colour. So again, I'm getting more blues and cool colours, warm colours again in together. Might even do another one with some slight greens in there or something like that. Just experimenting with colour to see what looks cool and looks alright. So I've got kind of quite a dark black there. In fact, I might bring that up slightly. It's a bit too black for my liking. It goes across to reds, and just to create another one, you just click in it, and that's it. And just to get rid of it, you just hold down the left mouse button, pull it off. So all I've done there is I've created a gradient based on the fractal sum. So I've colorized the fractal sum 1, if you wish, and put that into there. Then I've done a bit of a transform 2D just to zoom in a little bit on it, because you can see it's quite noisy, so I kind of zoomed in on it. If I wanted to blur that, what I could do is, if you select the actual node and press spacebar and then click a blur node, you can see it's just, whoa, it's made it really blurry. Or I can bring it down, the intensity of the blur. We're pretty much back to where we were. That's another option you've got. So if you want to, if that fractal sum's a bit too sharp, you might want to blur it off a little bit. I'm not too fussed with that at the minute. I don't really need that one in there. And again, you could also add in a sharpen. So obviously it'll just sharpen that up for you. Warp's a good one. Warp will obviously give you some kind of like warpy, trippy kind of effect, which is useful for blending into kind of the top of the tiles and everything like that. So then all I'm doing again is I'm taking that transform 2D, I'm plugging that into the foreground, so wherever it's white it's going to be shown, wherever it's black it's not. And then what I'm doing from this point is, this is for adding more variation into the actual grout itself. So I've gone back to that grout node there, and I'm pulling in the basis of the grout, adding in kind of all these different sort of like weird sort of like colours within the grout now, outputting that into this blend node over the top of that one. As you can see now, the grout's got sort of like all different sort of like colorations in it. Again, in a game, most people would just walk over here and they never even think about it. But if it's not there, it's going to look weird. If it was just sort of like one monotonous tone, you're going to look at it and go, oh, that's not very good. Or you're going to go, that doesn't look real, or it's just not going to look right. So from there, we've got the blend, and now I've got a hue, saturation, and levels. Same as in Photoshop again. It's just the same thing as an adjustment layer, using the hue, saturation, and levels. You got your sliders. I'm just pulling the saturation up a little bit, giving it a bit more colour into it, a bit more vibrance. And then in the end, at the moment, I mean, I'm still working on this, but that's the kind of the texture that you're going to get out of it for an albedo. No shadow information in there whatsoever, not at all. We've colorized some of the cracks and everything, but that's just like dirt accumulation. We're not actually creating an ambient occlusion into it. We're just giving it some sort of color variation wherever those scratches are. And so you got your base color from there. Awesome. Right, brilliant. Right, I know we're a bit lengthy on this tutorial, but we're nearly there now. So roughness. So where it's black, it's going to be super shiny, and where it's white, it's going to be super rough. Now this is where you can really go to town, and you can do whatever you... More artistic you get on this, the more surface variation you're going to get. And you want it to be kind of quite contrasty, but then again, you've still got to stick by the rules of PBR. So you've got to kind of still have a level of sort of luminance. You don't want to make this super shiny that you can see your face in it or anything like that, unless it were completely... I mean, it'd be mirrored. It wouldn't look correct. Might be a little more shinier than this, but this is kind of used floor tiles, so it's gonna look this dirty. So, but there are areas where you can see that, if I just bring up the actual map, so where it's darker it's shinier, where it's white it's not. So the scratches, they're going to be white because it's not as shiny, same as kind of the grout as well. But then on the tiles, as you can see, we've got like different variations of different levels of grey, so it's giving it interest in effect. When you see this in a game, it's not just generic floor tiles, it's going to give it interest. Like, oh, parts of scratches there, it's going over the top and it's looking dirtier in some parts. We've got grease marks, got just ground dirt and things like that. And this map is so important because it's where you can get your artistic freedom sort of back in the PBR kind of like chain of events as such, where you can go in and you can add in things like bespoke scratches and things that you wouldn't normally see. Awesome, absolutely great map. And the way that I'm creating this is, again, I'm coming out of this one this time, so I'm blending the scratches and the actual base of the floor tiles together. And again, using this as a mask to tell it where I want the actual scratches and where I don't want the scratches. I'm coming out of that into an invert grayscale. So when you look at it here, the whites are going to be really dull and the black's going to be really shiny, but we want it the other way because we're using metallic and roughness. So we need it to be black more shiny and white more rough. So that's why we get an invert grayscale. You can find one of those. If you just put inv, you'll find it there, an invert grayscale. If you're using RGB, you can invert RGB with that one. But because the roughness is just going to be grayscale, we grayscale. So then that's coming out of here into a levels. So then I'm kind of taking out all of the blacks because it's just far too black. If I plug this straight in, I mean it's too much. It's super clean. So no, that's just too much. So I'm just get rid of that one, plug that into there, that one into there, and we're back where we were. So I've just got a levels command and I'm just crushing down some of the blacks and the whites to take out some of the whiter tones. So then that way I've got more of a consistent level on the actual tiles. And good thing here is just check your roughness values, different lighting conditions, and just if it's really difficult to find any graphs on PBR at the moment, physical based rendering, but just try and find as much information as you can. If not, you just got to really, for us guys who are not in super main studios at the moment, we just got to find whatever information we can, and sometimes it might just be trying it in different lighting conditions and see how it looks. So we've got the levels going into here. I've got another blend because I'm blending in. What am I blending in this time? I'm blending in some of the grout variation into here, and that's blending in to give the grout more variation. And then I'm also just bringing in the convexity map just to give it, in fact that needs to be reversed actually, because what I want to do is I want to add a couple more shinier parts on the edges of the actual tiles themselves. So I just need to grab an invert grayscale and click that, and then I'm going to have to do some trickery here as well. So that's probably why I've left it for now actually, because all I've got to do then, I've just got to invert that again. So I'd have to invert that into that roughness, and then it'd be flipped back the correct way. The blend's actually messing around with it because it's got the blacks and everything. And I think this blend's on add linear dodge at the moment. So it's just adding the whiter tones and not the black. So I need to invert that and then invert that into a multiply. I know it sounds, you see, with everyone's own graph, they kind of know what they're going to do. And you'll find that yourselves, once you start really using it, you'll find that, yeah, I know what to do to invert this, and then I know that it's going to work at this level. And if it doesn't work, then you try and figure out why. It's great. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. It's brilliant. And then once you get to the end, I've got my blend there, and that's so far my final roughness. So, and it's looking okay. If you want to try this 3D view, I mean, I can pull this up. Let's have a look. So at the minute, it's just on the generic environment. If you look down here, there's environment materials. If I pull in abandoned, let's have a look, see what it looks like in abandoned. So that's more of a darker one. In fact, let me just bring on the backgrounds, and we can kind of see. Looks quite nice at the minute. And that's the beauty of not using any photographic imagery in your albedo. You're not going to get caught out with any stray shadows or anything like that. So yeah, it's a case of going through and just seeing what it looks like in all the environments. But one thing I do like to do is, once I've done all the maps, now you'll see there's a stray node here, okay? And what this has been checked. The luminance has been checked in Photoshop. So what I've done is I've gone and I've completed all the base color. For example, I want to make sure the luminance of the base color is correct. Again, you probably have to read up on some PBR stuff, but you do want to ensure that the actual albedo is not too dark, not too bright. Sorry. So you need to check the luminance values. And again, it's hard because there's not a definitive list of values. It's really difficult to find anything at the moment. But again, I mean, if it looks, someone once told me, if it looks good in every lighting condition, then you're golden. And at the moment, I mean, I'm not making this to go into a AAA game at the moment or anything like that. So I've got a bit of leeway, but you've got to make sure that it looks correct if you're going to do it at a studio, in a AAA studio. But normally they will have a big list of luminance values and everything. So what you do is, I want to export the actual materials that I've created. So the base color, the roughness and normal and all these. So if I right click on the actual substance tiles, export as bitmaps, and at the moment I'm just going to take out the base color because I just want to check its luminance value on this base color. So I've exported that out in Photoshop. This is it. So I've imported it in. Great texture this, there's no shadows, anything like that. We're golden, it's cool. It's this median value here in the histogram. Now you might not have the histogram up there, so if you click on window histogram it'll bring it up. There's also an option to do expanded view by clicking on that little drop down arrow. Click expanded view. I've also got the info tab here. This is for lab color, so luminance, and we've got the RGBs at this side. And when I go over the top of a kind of Actually, let me select the layer. When I go over the top of a pixel, it'll tell you its luminance values where it says it here. So you can see 29, 20, blah, blah, blah. But we want to have an average overall of the texture itself for kind of ceramics. It's sort of ceramic, isn't it? Tile ceramics. So we need to kind of have an idea in the real world what the actual median luminance would be for ceramics and tiles. So I've got this graph and chart which comes from Quixel, and it's been around a while now, but luckily enough there's a ceramic on there. So we're looking at the albedo, the luminance, so brush metal black, and then as it goes through, the luminance is obviously getting lighter. But we've got ceramic here, and it's sitting at a linear value of 0.57. So this is the figure that I'm looking at. So if you look at my median, it's at 57, 0.57. So that's correct at 5.7. You may need to adjust it. I got a brightness adjustment on top by clicking here and then going to brightness and contrast, and then you just click that and you get another one. And I've just clipped it with this. I don't know why, it's just habit that I clip things together. I mean, there's nothing else here, I don't need to. If I hold down Alt, you can see how it kind of changes into like an arrow with a slash through it. That's saying to unclip it. So if I keep Alt pressed, keep that on there and press left mouse button, it'll unclip it. So in effect, that brightness would affect all the layers below it. But if I hold down Alt and you see it's like clipping, if I had loads of layers, now that layer would only affect that layer 0. And if I click in here, if you watch this medium value, so I start pulling it up, it starts getting brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. So we don't want that. We want it about 57. So you can pretty much get it spot on. So we now know we've got a medium value for ceramic, sort of. Okay, I mean, this is about as close as I can get it, but it's looking good in most lighting conditions, so I'm pretty pleased with it. So I export that back out into Substance. So then I go right click import and then import it as a base color again. You see tiles base color adjusted. Then I just drag that into here, and this is the adjusted. This is the adjusted map. Now it's pretty close. If I click this, let me just make sure that's like that. Okay, right, so this is the adjusted and this is the output. It's pretty much the same. It's very slight. And we can probably see it in here as well. So if I plug this into here, because in effect it's a composite of everything. So this is the final output. So if I plug this into the final output, right, anyway, plug this into a base color, you can see just very slightly, but we know it's got a median value of 57, like it said on the Quixel chart. So that should look good in pretty much any lighting conditions. Yeah, it's looking good. I can imagine that in that bus station. Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. And with the different normal maps and the roughness maps all working together, you can see it's making it really interesting. So if we looked at it on top like we're walking on it, you could see as you walked across, you'd see like grease and dirt. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, why plugging in all these different blue colours and things like that? Yeah, but you don't see it, but as a whole you do see it, because it gives it that variation. I can see some of those blues in there actually as I just skim across the surface. So it's definitely worthwhile experimenting, trying different colour tones. Hey, I'm not using CG textures, man, anymore. Well, I do every now and again. I like CG textures, got nothing against them at all. But now I'm just pretty much colours and generating noises and using them as masks, and then bringing them all together, making sure all the values are as correct as I possibly can at the minute, to kind of find out how things are. But yeah, I mean, with like luminance values and everything. But that's the trickiest bit with PBR at the minute. There's a lot of information going around and there's not many values on the net. But I hope this has been useful. I really do hope this has been useful. And just get in there and just play around and just see what you can do. This is it, guys. This is probably the most powerful texturing tool that we can use at the moment. I'm a big fan of Quixel stuff, but I've got control here, guys. The key to texturing in my eyes is control. an experimentation. And I think using Substance Designer, and I hope I've demonstrated that in Substance Designer you can do that. And I'd just love to see any textures that you come out with. Post on my Facebook wall or wherever on this YouTube video comments, and I'd be more than happy to respond back. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know it's been a long one. Might have needed a break halfway through, but I hope it's been useful. And keep on texturing, guys, and I'll see you on the flip side. See you later, guys. Bye.